So I wanted to share a little bit of my journey and update on the little interfaith group that I've been part of. It's coming on 2 years, of which most of it was on Zoom because we got together just as COVID was really locking everybody down. Um, and it has been a really lovely journey. We did I don't know who came up with the idea. It was originally as it's a reading group. We go together and decide on a book to read. And then discuss some of the parts that make, really bring it alive for us. And so we decided on the Book of Joy, which just resonated across the board. I mean, how can you not find something precious with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness? And one of the things that I love, first of all, that I was able to really, I was spoiled for the year and a half, just being able to watch this exchange and knowing just a little bit about His Holiness from Venerable's sharing and listening to his teachings over the years. I had sort of a framework that the folks in our group didn't have. And so I tried to share some of that, his presence and how he really is in the world for Buddhists. And one of the things I loved about the book was that there was no powering over. There was no trying to convince the other that the one way was my way. They gave each other a lot of humorous hard time. I mean, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was like, when he found out that His Holiness got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, he said, "Man, you're making me look bad. I get up at 6." And the only time that they really, that you could see a little bit of a strong difference of opinion is that the Archbishop was very strongly said that human emotions are natural, they need to be expressed, and that anger is one of the natural human emotions that must be expressed in life. There are things that justify anger. Of course, His Holiness says this disturbs the mind, forget your clarity, forget your wisdom. It's not an emotion to even cultivate. But besides that, there was just this incredible convergence of the best of both Christianity and of Buddhism. So we just finished up, we're doing the meditations at the back of the book right now, their personal favorite meditations. And so now we're going into, and during that time we had 2 other books we were doing. One was called Common Healing, which had quotes of different faith traditions. And although it had a lot of Christian bent to them, I was able to navigate them fairly well. And then we had one called Love Poems from God, which was stories of the great visionaries, whether it was St. Francis or St. Teresa or Rumi, the great thinkers and spiritual practitioners. I was able to navigate that as well. But we now have a book now, and I'm not going to mention the title or the faith because I think it belongs to the people of this faith tradition that they really find helpful. But we haven't even gotten through the first chapter, and I'm like, okay. It's all about God, and it's about religious tolerance in the global community. But the author's assertion is a very common assertion, which we find usually in Christianity, is that we're all going up the same mountain. And as Venerable has said a number of times, is that if you have a particular assertion you want to make, you'll find all sorts of ways to justify that. And so this author has taken some things about the Buddha Dharma, and it fits right into some of this stuff. He's got that suchness, emptiness is God. And that, and part of it is that if you don't understand that the epitaphs for the Buddha, foe destroyer, arhat, world honored one, are in the context, a framework, you could easily see that he was some sort of God, some sort of creator, or a messenger of God. So this author, within the first chapters, already asserted that there's enough quotes in Buddhism to justify that Buddha was a God, or he's a messenger of God, because of the epitaphs that he has. So I'm already kind of like, okay. And we had some fairly direct conversations this past Monday when they came here to visit. And 2 of the other folks in the group that are Christian also have some issues with the book. I think it's just the generalization of religions that are going to follow the way that this person thinks. So I didn't want to, cut this whole thing off at the pass, and I decided that I would want to have His Holiness sort of help me with my perspective. Am I going to be able to work through this book without feeling like I'm giving up something fundamental or something that's going to confuse me? I don't need to protect the Dharma. I don't need to defend the Buddha. That's not where I'm going. But I wanted to see if His Holiness could give me a hand here. So there's a beautiful book that we have in the library that I have been reading this past week. It's called Toward a True Kinship of Faiths. And His Holiness has been doing interreligious dialogue for like 45 years. This person knows how to talk to different faiths without giving in to this understanding that this ultimate truth belongs to everybody. And so and one of His Holiness's he has three priorities in this life. It's to really to encourage and support compassion, friendship, generating ethical, conduct, irregardless. Secular ethics is high on his list, preserving the Tibetan culture, and interfaith dialogue. So this is something that is a high priority on his list. And so in this, I wanted to just share some things that His Holiness has said that I'm really appreciating, because the last part of this book talks about the challenges of other religions, that we're all meeting up against this in some form or another. So it does say here that there is this metaphor of multiple rivers all converging into a great ocean that suggests that the world faith traditions, with their distinct beliefs, irregardless, all of them ultimately lead to the same place, whether it's the Godhead or Jesus or the Spirit or whatever. And His Holiness is very clear and says, my view is different. The possibility of genuine interreligious understanding and harmony should not be, need not be, contingent upon proving that the ultimate oneness of all religions. He says it's not necessary. And that the understanding of the other must proceed from a genuine recognition of and respect for the other's reality. It must proceed from a state of mind where the urge to reduce the others into one's own framework is no longer the dominant mode of thinking. So to try to meld everybody into your own faith. And that he says that 6 billion human inhabitants in this world have been living with spiritual faith traditions, and that he says that the mental dispositions, the spiritual inclinations, the conditioning, the cultural sensibilities over thousands of years have given rise within different faith traditions a particular different habits of mind, that we've all cultivated through these legacies of faith traditions, a particular perspective. And that the perspective is very real and very true for the people of that faith tradition. And that to try to change this overnight, who wants to, and is it even desirable? And that because the world, probably 1,500 years ago, religions lived in such isolation that everybody that you knew within the framework believed basically the same thing. But because of social media, because of tourism, because of interdependence and globalization, there's rare to find places where religion is in an isolated place. And that it's not tenable. And the best thing to do is to try to understand how we can all live together. So the religious scholars, and this was helpful for me to kind of understand, because there's some stuff going on right now in the world, this fundamentalism that's kind of doing some and getting politicized, is that they say for spiritual practitioners, generally speaking, when you think about other faiths, you can fall into 3 different categories. All right. The first one is exclusivism, where you will go to war for your faith. That there is without any hesitation that you have the one true faith, and everybody pretty much out there has got some false understanding. So that's the exclusivism, and we're seeing that in whether it's the Taliban or the fundamentalist Christians or whatever, they're holding that. The second one is inclusivism, which is kind of valid. The religions all have some unique aspects of themselves, but once again, they're all going to the same mountain, which is where this book kind of is starting from. And then the third one is pluralism, which is to accord every religion with a dignity and a deep respect. And His Holiness, just the way that he kind of holds it, he says there are these, 7+ billion people on this planet with all these just different dispositions and capacities, not even thinking about karma, and that they have found meaning and inspiration and solace within their spiritual framework. And he says, you just can't, why would you want to insist that there's something that they should be doing differently than what they have? And he said, he doesn't see any contradiction with two ways of looking at this. First, he says there is one faith, one truth. And within the context of one individual practitioner, where you want to focus totally on your faith, on the ritual, on the doctrine, on the scripture, on the understandings, on the ritual, on the practice, because that's holding you in its truth. And that is necessary to really become the spiritual practitioner you want. But within society, where you've got all this stuff going on, everybody's thinking differently, that kind of thinking can fall into fundamentalism if you don't give people permission to do what it is that you feel called to do from your own spiritual perspective. And right now, we've just got a lot of stuff going on that he's got a definition of fundamentalism, which I found really helpful. Fundamentalists, irrespective of their religious affiliations, tend to believe that the contemporary world is rife with immorality and ungodly values, and that the role of the devout is to try to bring human society back to the golden age when the world functioned according to the dictates of a moral God. Fundamentalists on the whole believe strongly that their scriptures contain the totality of all the truths that are worth knowing, and that it is their fundamental responsibility to defend the truths of this scripture against the onslaught of pluralistic or secular ideas that relativize truth. An important part of the standpoint of fundamentalism is therefore to defend the literal truth of scripture and maintain its definitive status. That is the name of the game. The commands of God as they understand them to be revealed are absolute, atemporal, and non-negotiable. And His Holiness says, is that going to work? Because his understanding, his belief is that the fundamental heart of all religions in their pure form, because the whole thing about Book of Joy was this convergence about all the things that faith traditions can have in common. And that he says we've got to let go of this wanting to be right, that our doctrinal and philosophical beliefs are personal, help us, but on the bigger picture, they become a huge obstacle to be able to promote harmony in the world. That we've got to come back to the fundamental pieces of compassion, warm-heartedness, secular ethics, spiritual ethics, however you want to call it. But that we've got, and to see that from my own mind as I'm going into this book is to not get on my high horse about the Dharma. To not get on, I don't need to defend it, I don't need to justify it. I would like to be able to kindly and clearly and accessibly clarify some of the misunderstandings that might come up in this book. But that I want to be able to hold this book in respect and dignity. The people who practice this faith tradition that I've gotten to know pretty well are just lovely human beings that really embody the warm-heartedness and the compassion of their faith. And so I'm going to try to have His Holiness help me navigate through this book. I may have to pull all the gods out of the paragraphs and see if it still works for me, or to reframe it within the Buddha Dharma. But I want to also open myself up to the diversity and the possibility of being able to hold somebody else's faith without compromising any understanding that I have of my own faith, my own refuge, my own understanding, and to support them on their journey. And the fact that they want to share this with us because this is really alive for them, that's the place that I want to hold the book. It still has not been decided whether we're going to go forward, because there's a few people in the group that are not quite sure about the book as well. But I'm open to it, and I'm going to let His Holiness guide me along the way to keep my heart open. So I'll kind of let you know in the next while if there's a turn or another decision that we make. But right now I'm keeping my heart open thanks to His Holiness's perspective on the whole thing.